A very good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kasturi Ramalingam. I'm a PhD student in Educational Psychology, UTM Johor. So blessed today, I have given an opportunity to present my study entitled Influence of Intrinsic and Extrinsic Motivation in Learning Among Primary School Students. This study is supervised by Professor Dr. Yoki Jia. This is my research outline. First is the introduction. Next, research objective. Third is research methodology. Fourth, discussion. Fifth, suggestion for improvement. And finally, conclusion. As an introduction, language is the main medium of communication to interact each other. Accordingly, each student has been exposed to more than one language in the context of Malaysian education and students' excellence measured by the students' language learning. However, issues of lesson failure and unsatisfactory students' exam results are often linked to a variety of factors. Among the reasons that are often thrown by students and educators is the lack of motivation in students. This concept paper will discuss in more detail the relationship between students' motivation and language learning. Therefore, motivation is an essential for successful language learning, especially in countries where English is taught as a second language, such as Malaysia. This concept paper is made to identify whether intrinsic motivational factors influence learning motivation among the students. Number two, identify whether extrinsic motivational factors influence learning motivation among the students. The methodology used in this concept paper is based on research in the library, collection of information and materials based on previous studies related to influencing factors and ways to increase motivation among students. Various study designs found findings from previous studies. All information and materials are collected, organized, and divided into several categories to understand the meaning of the phenomenon. In this section, this discussion will be focused on definition of motivation and language learning motivation. Next, there will be two main theories will be discussed, Gardner's theory of motivation and self-determination theory SDT. Next is the type of motivation which we'll discuss in detail about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Finally, ways to increase students' motivation will be discussed in this section. Now, let's look at definition of motivation. Motivation has been defined in various forms and concepts by researchers in psychology and other scientific fields. According to Manap 2019, motivation is a strong desire or strong spirit in a person that motivates him to strive and do something in order to achieve his or her objectives. According to NAS 2016, motivation serves three primary functions, which are as follows. First, encourage people to engage in an activity. Number two, determine the behavior that will be used in order to achieve the desired result. And the third one is setting aside unhelpful acts and identifying behaviors that are consistent with goal. Next is language learning motivation are based on intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation are two types of motivation that can be used in instructional practices. Next is motivation theory. There are two theories in this concept paper. The first is Gardner's theory of motivation and the second is the self-determination theory SDT. Gardner used this as a starting point, proposing a model that included the individual's attitude towards the second language and the community, in addition to his or her own orientation as factors that had a direct impact on a second language learning behavior. It is critical to have a strong desire to learn the language as well as positive attitudes towards learning the language before beginning. The second theory, developed by Deci and Ryan, 1985, was known as self-determination theory, SDT. This theory distinguishes between two types of motivation, namely extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, both of which have an impact on the success of language learners. Next discussion will be focused on type of motivation. Motivation is influenced by two factors, namely intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, which is formed through learning and experience and leads to feelings and fulfillment. There are two methods in intrinsic motivation, namely the reward method and the punishment method. The reward method is that the student will be given love, praise, and appreciation from others. The method of punishment involves anger and fines. Extrinsic motivation is opposite of intrinsic motivation. This is because this type of motivation leads to the desire to act on external factors of the self. All activities based on this type of motivation are only intended to meet short term and self needs, such as wanting to get a certificate, avoid being punished, or to get the attention of teachers and friends. The further steps is to increase students' motivation. For that, the clearer the goal to be achieved, the stronger the students' motivation to learn. New game based on the presentation of related multimedia will enhance motivation. There is a need of integrated technology in teaching with the improvement of students' performance. High teachers' commitment and coupled with teaching skills will create a learning environment that is always good. In addition, the way to increase students' motivation is through motivational programs conducted. Students who are responsible, well disciplined, diligent, and they will have very high motivation. School climate or good school atmosphere is also a factor which will contribute to the increase in students' achievement motivation. Suggestions to improve. Future studies are proposed to examine in more depth factors of the relationship of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation to students' language learning. Study needed to see the effect of low motivation among students. Third, identify the factors that cause low motivation and its relationship with students' self development. As a conclusion, teachers must be sensitive and wise in determining the needs of a student. Teachers and students should help each other and work collectively to maintain their level of motivation. So, motivation is an important element in subjects learning and it really helps students in learning. Thank you.